How would you, in general, describe just the state of art right now? To really get yourself out there, you have to have some original concepts, and I think essays are to. It doesn't end, does it? I mean, we're always promoting. I don't know that we'll ever get to a point, at least maybe not in my lifetime, where people see the arts as vital to living. Hi. Hi.
How's it going? It's going very well. Hey, it's what we like to hear. How's it going with you? Things are good. Thank you for asking. Thank you for your set. Thank you for your poetry. What are some things you were thinking about as you put that together? Well, I'm a part of this is I'm still sort of promoting the book, the Grace of Gazing Inward book. And so in some recent readings, I've been reading a number of those poems, but I also wanted to read a couple of those newer ones, the Dark Matter poem and the Old Neighborhood poem. I don't sing very often when it comes to my poems. you don't sing often. Yes, you're right. So, if I have an opportunity to sing, I'll put that in cool. That's also the baritone. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But, it's spring in Columbus. I love trees. And so the trees have been very inspiring to me of late. And so you may have noticed there were a lot of trees in those poems. Some specific trees, but then some just sort of generally came up, in the lines. So I think that was probably on my mind as well. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you're still promoting. Yes. It doesn't end, does it? I mean, we're always promoting, at least to a degree. Even if it's not the books, I think, we're always promoting. Yeah, even if it's just like the image of our self to people. I know not everyone likes to think of it that way. Yeah. Well, and I just got delivered the other day. I had bookmarks made because I don't have a business card for me as a poet. I have business cards for my day job, but I don't. So, but I thought a business card is kind of, I don't know, they don't really serve as much of a purpose these days. So I thought, well, I'll get bookmarks instead. So if anybody wants a bookmark tonight before you read, I would be happy to give you one because you're promoting. Look at you. That's it. That's what I mean. And I about a week ago, I revamped my website a little bit. I made a number of changes. Thanks in part to you because the talk that I gave at the museum last December, I was able to embed that on my website. And then another reading I was able to embed on my website. And so, yeah, it was kind of time. But, I don't have a lot of time. So once I did have the time, it's like, okay, I really need to get things updated. I'm so glad because that's part of the reason we do the video. Is it's like, it's for the platform, but in honesty, the video is the most valuable thing I can get. It's more valuable than any of money and things like that I can throw at you, or even the show, because the video, you can do whatever you want with it, Yeah. In that experience. I don't think a lot of poets understand that yet. Well, I'm very appreciative of it because, again, with my schedule the way it is, I don't have as much time to put all that stuff together. Yeah. So I'm really grateful to you for providing that. Yes, because you have to get it, you have to learn it, you got to compile it, you got to then, it's much easier if someone just hands it to you. I have a reading from the Streetlight Guild back in 2023, I think it was, in September, for the Rhapsody and Refrain series. And I recorded it, audio, not video. It's just sitting somewhere, and it's sitting in my it's just my storage, my network storage. I think this is a good entry into kind of something I wanted to talk about with you. We've had you on the channel before talking about nonprofits. This is when you were still president of the OPA. I'm sure you're enjoying your retirement from that. Semi-retirement, right? Right. I'm sure they still bring different incapacities, but I think this is a really important topic for poets and artists to be considering. We look at what's happening with the NEA and just kind of funding in general. I mean, arts is always battling this, so it's a surprise that's not surprised, Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to just pick your brain on these aspects of it. How would you, in general, describe just the state of art right now? Well, in the United States, yes, we'll keep it in that. Yeah, in Texas. Well, I think historically, at least in modern American history, the arts had been viewed more as sort of thing like avocational. You know, I think I would venture a guess that the majority of Americans don't see art as being vital to living. Now, there are a lot of other countries that do, fortunately. Uh, so I think we suffer from a little bit of um, a lack of knowledge, a lack of wisdom when it comes to understanding the role that the arts can play in our lives. And I think that's reflected by the kinds of folks who get into power, especially now. And you're seeing, all that funding stripped away because they just don't see a value in the arts. And so I think this is going to take a long time to turn this around. I don't know that we'll ever get to a point, at least maybe not in my lifetime, where people see the arts as vital to living. But for those of us who understand that and appreciate it, I think our lives are enriched beyond our wildest imaginations. I know mine has been,
Right.
and it's not just because I'm producing. All right, I'm not because I'm producing poems and making books and all that. My life has been enriched because of occasions like this, or going to an opening reception for an exhibition, or going to a concert where I am moved by what I'm seeing. I have made so many friends through the years because of my endeavors in the poetry community and the larger arts community.
Yeah.
And you can't place a monetary value on that. That's a kind of a spiritual, sort of wealth. And there's so many people in this country who lack that and could use it, right? And so, yeah, I think with a lot of this government funding that's being stripped away, it's going to take a while to get that back. And in the meantime, I think artists are going to have to work even harder. We were talking about promotion. They're going to have to work harder to promote themselves. They're going to have to work harder to get their work into people's hands and to get their names out there. And it's going to be a challenge. Really going to be a challenge.
I think it's interesting you bring up the international context because I agree with you. I think that other countries' approach to art is different than what we see in the U.S. At the same time, the U.S. benefits just because of its size, its GDP. That you look at like the largest funded arts organizations and where they're located. They're in the it's art's not high on the hierarchy, but just it's benefited from just the fact that the U.S. is so large that it still gets more than like some entire countries, right? Like, so the funding cut is an issue. I don't want to say like it could be worse, but it could also be worse at the same time.
Yeah. There are pockets, right,
Yeah.
in the United States where the arts are really important to the communities. But those are more the exceptions than the rule, right? You think about especially rural areas or even a suburb like where I live, the arts just are not held that high. And the other thing you're seeing is that kids are being discouraged to study the arts, right? In school, I mean, the arts classes are things that cut. Yeah, they're some of the first ones that get cut.
Yeah.
Arts, music. And so it's like, well, no wonder so many of our kids are suffering from sort of, emotional crises on a regular basis. Show them the arts, get them into the arts, whatever degree it is, and they will find, I think, a way to help them cope with the challenges that they're facing on a daily basis. But we're doing the opposite.
So if we're doing the opposite, how do you think poets need to respond?
Well, I think if you are an active poet, I think you can maybe direct some of your energies to working with kids. I try to do that as my schedule allows. And so, whether it's working in a school, working at a community center, And I say working, I really mean volunteering, because in most cases, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a voluntary effort. But it doesn't have to be. But,
I know where you were, Lois. Yeah.
but, I think, again, it goes back to what I said a moment ago, where if you're able to do that, you're going to enrich your own life spiritually while also maybe helping some kids or some other people in your community to be lifted, right? Spiritually lifted, emotionally lifted, and maybe give them, a little glimmer of, hope that they could take whatever it is they're experiencing in life and channel that into something creative rather than something destructive.
I'm thinking about that volunteering you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think that is the traditional way I think art is handled, where art is I'll help out kids or I'll help out these people for free. I'll dedicate my time, to good. I'll donate.
Yeah.
So much of art revolves around donation, philanthropy, nonprofit. How do you think that association with, again, like nonprofit, philanthropy, and art helps or hurts art?
Well, anytime that there's money involved, right? The people that have the money are going to probably have some level of say into what you're producing, what you're selling, what you're doing with your art. Maybe I'm just becoming more cynical as I get older, but I just feel like, there are probably few folks out there with money who are giving that money to artists just because they have a big heart. Now, I'm sure there are, but there probably are certain strings attached, at least to a certain degree. Or if it's not money, think about, for example, in Ohio, the poet laureate process, right?
Right.
Ultimately, the poet laureate is selected by the governor of the state.
Right.
And so it doesn't get much, bigger than that when it comes to having a say in the arts in Ohio. So,
How do I phrase this? You mentioned like people giving money to artists because they have a big heart. Do you think the artists struggle to demonstrate the value of their art to people, so then they're reliant on people to be like, oh, have a big art to support me? Like, is it that artists are just struggling to really show their value to people?
I think some of them, yeah. I can't speak for
Right.
all of them, certainly.
So I guess the real question is, how do we change that? So how do we show the value of art to people, to show that it's so significant that no, you're not paying for this out of the generosity of your heart. You're paying for this because you get something. It benefits you. It helps you.
Boy, that's a tough question.
I'm sorry, you big ones and stars.
Well, okay, I'll
Play with me.
I'll use some experiences with OPA.
Yeah.
Right. Because those are probably the most immediate for me. And we did this Underground Railroad project last year, and we had so many people who talked to us after some of these events and after our capstone celebration last year about how amazing that project was, because it did so many things. It lifted up poets, but it also, shined a light on a legacy for the state of Ohio and for the Underground Railroad movement that maybe hadn't been done before, right? And we got the community involved, where we had people, write lines for us in response to a prompt, and then we put all of those lines together at the end of the project and unveiled our community poem. Again, making connections with folks in other organizations. Once they saw what came out of some of those programs for that project, they want to do more, right? And so in that regard, it's really about getting things down to the community level, the local community level. And it just takes a lot of hard work. I would venture to guess that there are going to be people who don't get it, who may never get it, but that's a good thing, right? So, no, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but you're not going to convince every American citizen that the arts are important. That's just unrealistic. But if you can convince folks who are willing to then take what they learn and take their inspiration and pass it on, well, that is ultimately what we need to do. Whether it's with children, whether it's with adults, whether it's with folks who are incarcerated, folks who are struggling with mental illness, whatever. I think we have to try to reach all those different members of our community.
I agree with that. I would contest that we don't necessarily want to reach all of them at the same time. Because if I'm approaching, like if I'm focusing on the incarcerated community and I'm also focusing on single moms, it's going to be hard. The messaging is going to be tricky. Whereas like if I can dedicate all my energy to like, okay, we're going to target just the incarcerated. Like imagine like I'm creating a poetry collection. If I'm targeting just the incarcerated, that's very different than if I'm targeting like, right, the cover will change. The poems, the ordering might change, the epigraphs might, everything can change based on the person I'm really trying to think about who can get the most from this.
I think one of the things that, I tried to do when I was president of OPA was to find people who would step up and join our team that could take on certain tasks, certain projects, so that, it doesn't fall down to one, small group of people, that you could really bring other folks in. And so with the Underground Railroad Project, for example, we had Poets Against Racism and Hate USA who came aboard as a partner. And that was vital to making that project happen.
Yeah.
Because they have a certain platform, a certain mission. OPA has a certain platform, a certain mission. And now you're kind of able to reach a much larger audience than maybe OPA would have by themselves.
I mean, that seems to be a refrain based on things I'm hearing from you, is the need for community and collaboration. Like that's the earlier question was, how do poets need to respond to the situation right now? And that might be a direction that's tangible that people can take. How can I work with others who may not even be poets to create something larger than myself?
Yeah. I always valued being part of the team. Maybe it was ingrained in me, as a kid playing Pee Wee football, basketball, soccer, whatever. But I always enjoyed being part of the team. And thus I tried to pass along the joy that I experienced being part of the team and try to, show people like, hey, you will get a lot out of this.
Right.
Yes, you may put in a lot of work, but you're going to get a lot out of this just psychologically and spiritually, and make friends for life probably in the process.
Well, that's nice.
Really? I mean, no, for sure. We talked about this before earlier. I'm a working poet, right? I have a day job. And so poetry for me it's not hobby, but it feeds me in a different way, right? My day job helps me earn a paycheck so that I can feed myself, like literally with food and drink. But the poetry, writing it, reading it, being involved in the community with it, that feeds me in a completely different way that I don't get anywhere else. Because I'm not a musician, so I don't, I don't hang out.
Well, the baritone, but like. I know we're going up against time, as you can hear. So I guess one of my last questions, you're on your 4th collection. Okay. So you're in it, you're literally creating something that people can tangibly, physically walk away with. You've done it 4 times, let's think about the poet who has no collections right now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that poet should know? Not necessarily about the first collection that they make, but by the time they get to fourth.
I'm sorry.
Problem or Karen, I'd be in a troublemaker. He said, for people in our audience, I'm so sorry.
She's yelling again.
You have 4 collections. Some people don't have one, right? Not even a single one. Yeah. What do you think poets need to know? Not about having their first collection, but by the time they have their 4th collection, what do you think are some realistic, practical things that they should know about that?
About getting to the 4th collection?
Yeah.
Be patient. I mean, I'm publishing my 4th book, but it's taken me 10 years, almost 10 years to do that. And it's my first full-length book. The first 3 are chapbooks, basically. The book with Alice's artwork, you could argue whether that's a full-length book or not because of the artwork, but yeah. Be patient and be diligent, In my experience, if you continue to work, it'll pay off. But you've got to be diligent and you've got to do your homework. If you're placing individual poems in journals or online journals or whatever, that's great. But it can be daunting to put together a collection because how do you organize the poems? How do you arrange it? Sometimes it's kind of obvious, right? If you're doing something like, I think of Kathleen Burgess's collection, which is essentially a memoir in poetry. And so she's kind of taking us through her journey in South America from beginning to end. So that one was very obvious, the way that was going to be structured.
Mm-hmm.
But with a lot of collections, it may not be that obvious. And so you may need some feedback as you begin to build the manuscript from folks who have put together some collections. And this is, again, where that networking and getting to know people really comes in handy. Because I have, for at least 3 of the 4 books, I've had good poet friends who have read the manuscripts and have advised me on the structure of each book. And so that is invaluable. And you could pay somebody to do that, right? If you wanted to, if you had the money to do it. But if you're close to a community of poets, chances are somebody's going to be willing to do that for you and to help you get the collection into the state it needs to be in to really attract a publisher.
I would even, and feel free to push back on this. It's not just about someone else who's willing to help you, but probably wants.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think sometimes we miss out when we push our own projects. There are people that want to come along and be part of it. But sometimes I think we feel like that would be a burden on them. So we speak for them instead of allowing them the chance to reject.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate in that the poet friends that I've garnered through the years, they want and are willing to help. And they don't expect really anything in return. And that is just a blessing, But that's again, in my experience in Ohio, in the poetry community in Ohio, that's how poets are. Most of the poets I've met, I'd say 99% of the poets I've met in Ohio and beyond, they want to help you. They want to help you get that book out. They want to help you get published. They want to help you go have readings and, begin to elevate your work and get it into people's hands. That's just the kind of community it is.
My last question is, you mentioned for collections that if you continue to work, it will pay off. What does that mean if the work pays off?
Well, if your goal is to get the collection published, that's the payoff, right? Now, what comes after is a whole other issue. Because there are different ways to publish your book, right? You could get it just published with no sort of monetary prize or stipend or whatever. But you get that book published, and then most cases it's going to fall on you to promote it, to get yourself readings, and to get it into people's hands. If you want a prize, well, usually that comes with a little bit of money, certain number of copies, maybe some promotion on your behalf. So depending on where it gets published and how it gets published, the payoff could be a little different. But in my mind, the ultimate goal is to get the collection published.
So that's the end point.
That's the
Publications in the world.
for me, it should accomplish.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And again, I'm a working poet, right? I have a day job, so the poetry for me is not really a monetary endeavor. It's a different kind of wealth that I'm getting out of it. But if you want to make it your means, right, to living, that's going to take a lot more work. And that's what I mean. You have to be willing to put that in.
No. That's what I often tell poets is that for that level of independence, the book can't be the end goal. The book is step one for everything else that comes after it. Right? It's not the exit.
Yeah.
It's the on-ramp.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, in some ways I'm thinking about my not too distant future where hopefully I get to retire from my day job and then make my writing my occupation.
Now we need to talk about something else. Why'd you tell me that now?
Well, because in addition to the poetry, I recently have an idea for a collection of essays. And I've been chatting up this idea with some poet and writer friends, and I'm getting lots of encouragement. I'm just going to casually drop this. It's just an idea right now. Writing essays is a very different.
It is. That's actually, I'm literally wrapping up a first draft of this. Actually, I think essays are the next. I think books of poetry are it, but I think to really get yourself out there, you have to have some original concepts, and I think essays are the.
Well, and I've been inspired recently by several books actually, but Hanif Abdurraqib's prose collections have just been blowing me away and really inspiring me. Scott Wood's book about Prince,
Right.
That one has inspired me. Even Considering Genius by Stanley Crouch, which came out over 10 years ago, is a book about jazz musicians and mostly the big names, Davis, Coltrane, and so on. And that book is just fantastic, getting the insights. But my idea is a little bit more memoir-ish in concept. And we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I guess we'll have to do a part 2. All right, that's fine. It's fine. I know it's already getting late and they're going to be starting soon, but Chuck, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you guys for being with us.
Thank you all.